Good evening, everybody. Welcome to EduTALK. The EduTALK is a weekly virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community. Focuses on topics in education that directly impact all of us in today's society. This evening, we're talking about women, and we have three of us as men here on the platform. And so, before we came on the air here, we're just deliberating and looking at the idea that we're three men on here. Philip is here with us again. Philip Panaritis. He is no stranger to all of us, and we're very happy to have him. And Dr. Barker, of course, our other hosts of the program. So, Philip, take us. We're talking about women and the role changes in society for women. I know that impact all of us really, mothers and sisters and everybody else in between. So, Philip, what were you saying now? Before Dr.
I
Barker.
just, we were talking in general, there's a lot of good things statistically to report. If we take a long view, if we look at where women were in employment and salaries and things, but there's such a long way to go. And having said that, there's progress that's been made. It's important to understand that, particularly with the pandemic and the last 3 years, there is over 5 million American women that were part of the workforce and haven't been able to go back, haven't been able to. First of all, they were the ones who had to provide childcare when it was homeschool. And they childcare, and it wasn't just childcare, it was helping the kids to learn, checking the homework. And it's been a long time since a lot of women have, or men have been, adults have been in school. And for the high school kids, I don't know if I could help a high school kid in calculus. So there was all of that, and women bore that burden way more than men. And the other thing that happened during the pandemic, and this is really something that hits women more than men, is that child care facilities, 16,000 of them, went out of business in the United States. And those range from large ones to mom and grandma one around the corner. And that made it harder and harder for women to get to leave that role and get back. And plus, if we're to talk about childcare and the burden of it, you don't know how many, well, maybe you do, maybe you have the same situation. Just talking yesterday to a friend of mine whose daughter and son-in-law, they're both working, and the daughter's salary is virtually eaten up every month by the cost of childcare. So it would be nice, everyone said we were going to learn lessons from the pandemic, but it seems like capitalism right back where it was, and some people are making enormous profits still, continued in the COVID era. And I think women bear a lot of those costs. And as we all know, statistics and our own lives and experiences also tell us that, having said that, that poor women, that class is an issue, and also women of color, brown and black women, have a special burden to carry, and they have the lowest pay and the least education and bear that burden the most. So
yeah, thank you, Philip, for opening up with those, especially the statistics. Our previous show, I had Judy Villeneuve Dice on, and to open up Women's History Month last week, and she mentioned some statistics about women of color in the U.S., that they're very educated. A statistic showed that they're very educated, but as you mentioned, they're still not measured up in terms of salary, and it's not their fault. It's the systems that are in place for women, for women in general. It's not even women of color. It's women in general, as you mentioned. Do we think, Baka, you want to say something before we get into the meat of it?
Oh no, I'm listening by saying, I'm just listening. Here are the
Okay.
conversations.
All right. So are we saying that the role of women, because it has changed even before the pandemic, changed, so that and so they took on, as you mentioned, childcare and so on. When I was growing up, so background to this, I grew up and I saw my grandmother took on several roles, even taught me to iron my own clothes and cook while my grandfather was in the field on the farm, and he wouldn't do that. You know, the role was very traditional. He wouldn't cook so much unless he's very hungry and my grandmother wasn't home. Now that it has changed somewhat, I saw them as him. He will cook a little bit. My grandmother is still working, doing everything around the house. My mom now, as a modern woman, she cooked. She goes out and she works, and she provides for childcare and so on. So I see. Is it that they're taking on a lot more, even though we're saying that the roles are shifting for women and men, that they're balanced? I don't see the balance. So I'm wondering if there's a balance in the roles, or if women are taking on more now that they are saying that we need equal rights and equal equity across the board for women and men. Is it more? Is it just not measuring up for them?
Well, I think that also that there's a backlash now in so many countries, many authoritarian countries, a backlash against, and you see it with the fight for choice, for the right to have an abortion. Now the subsequent fight for the abortion pills or lack of access to those. But it's really looking at it from a teacher's point of view and 35 years in education. When I started teaching, I was good friends with a woman who taught at an elementary school nearby. And elementary schools were almost always had male principals and almost entirely female teachers. And that paradigm it lasted for the longest time. And I remember asking her, she said, "Oh, would my feet hurt so much?" And a teacher, they did years ago, I remember reading about how far a teacher walks around the room, or at least we hope they do.
Yeah.
Walks in the school, especially elementary teachers, they have to walk their kids drop them off at the cafeteria, drop them off at the gym. And so she was wearing these high heels, and they were kind of, high. And I said, "Why don't you wear sneakers or some comfortable shoes?" She says, "No, we can't do that." What do you mean? Why not? Well, the principal insists. The principal told it when he hired us all, he said, "You will dress in a business-like fashion, and that means a skirt or dress and high heels." But today that would be laughed out of the building. And of course and also at one point someone got a tattoo in that school, and a woman got a tattoo, and that had to be covered up. So just 35 years ago, the role that a male could play, and often did play, in creating what essentially was his own, and he never hired anyone who was too skinny or too heavy. So this jerk created his personal little eye candy harem of 32. Literally, there was no men in the building except him and he and 3 custodians. So, and he would compliment them. "Oh, I think that's a new dress," and all that type of stuff. So that's I haven't seen that in a long time, and 35 years is a very quick amount of time for that to abate, and it's about time that it did. There were women were subject in the teaching profession to so many outrages, and if you want to go back to 100 years and look at women that worked out in rural schools, they had to board. My mother in rural upstate New York, the teacher boarded with every 2 months they moved to another place, and that was part of their. They had a salary, and then the community provided board. Well, okay, these are 16, 17-year-old old young women coming out of a normal school, a few 2 years training in the beginning, then later they got so it was 4,
Oh.
but they would go and you teach the kids all day, and then you go home with one of the kids at night and or in the afternoon, and you can guess what that was like. Sometimes it worked out fine. Other times they put the older women in the house, and the man considered her to be some kind of servant. So she had to go from the school to washing dishes to working in the fields. The husband, some husbands thought they cornered them in a room, something like that. That they so there was exploitation sexually, and all of that is. And I remember teaching a lesson with high school kids, and there were the rules for the teacher, and it said you can't go in and this was sold by a textbook company to boards of education in small places all around the country. You can't be seen in an ice cream store. You can't be seen. You can't be in a car unless it's with your father or your brothers. All of these sort of reasons, and the the question was, and the kids were outraged. Oh, I wouldn't stand. I wouldn't put up with that. I wouldn't. I said, let me tell you something. The lesson of that is that there were the halls were the hiring halls were filled with women to get those jobs. What does that tell you about the role of women at that period in America?
Yeah.
And they put up with all of that nonsense because teaching was a better job. It had more status, and it paid a little more. There was more room for advancement than what was open to white women in the rest of the country, which was working in factories, horrible factories, but for the most part, 12 hours, repetitive, no chance for advancement, nasty working conditions, or working in what they call the dry goods store, a department store, which is very low wage, low prestige. So that's where women started in public education. And the fact that and today, I don't know about England, but in New York, I think that we have a majority of women principals, and that never was the case. And it used to be actually before the union came together, the United Federation of Teachers in New York City, there were 2 unions, and one was for high school, which was primarily male, and they negotiated their own contract with the Board of Education. And then there was one for the other union, which was for the women, the 85% women that taught elementary school. And so you got paid less as a woman. Also, one of the things that was on that list of things to do, not to do, is marry. When you married, you lost the job. Should you become pregnant, whether through marriage or through without a father or without a marriage, you lost the job.
So
And why was that? Why was that? That goes to the Americans' puritanical view of sex, that you can't be in the classroom pregnant because that proves to the kids that you've had sexual experiences. And God, that can't be the case. We can't have teachers doing that. So there was this hypocritical, intrusive, and today, so many of those things, I'm glad to say, have backed off. But now you have, even in education, you have the pushback from the people that want to turn the clock back to the 1960s, and the whole Black history, and teaching. It's not just Black history; it's women's history too. Women in textbooks were, for the most part, were treated in little blurbs. There was the text with the main history, and then there was a box.
Yeah.
Oh, let's take the textbook, and so we can tell people that we did something for women. And every chapter will add 2 of these boxes that will profile. We'll do Harriet Tubman here. Oh, make sure you have an Asian one somewhere too. That sort of tokenism, and treating that part of the history really not in a substantive way, in a trivial kind of way. So I would love to see, I mean, women's history is American history, just like Black history is.
Yeah.
And ideally, you wouldn't have to have a Women's History Month or a Black History Month. It would be thoroughly incorporated into and treated as real history. But and I think also that if the AP course was in women's history, or if in a big or you tried to get the state to let you teach a woman's history course in place of U.S. history, that they wouldn't go for that. And the same people, the New York Post, that jumped on this would jump on that as well. So I'm not sure America is, as much progress as there been, I'm not sure we're ready to substantively look at the history of women in this country with all of their accomplishments, and yes, all of the ugliness that has accompanied it from the beginning in what is a patriarchal system.
So Philip, that's a very comprehensive look at it, from socially and educationally, the journey of the female. So with all of this, the policies, and it's not even policies so much, but a change in the social norms of women and society in general. We are seeing where women are being heard. They're being heard, even if the policies haven't changed or they haven't put any amendments to any constitutional articles. They have a voice, just like with equity right across the board with sexual orientation or the other areas in which that people are not being heard, and people are talking about them. But it's still happening where women they're not treated equally, and equally. I think sometimes we tend to confuse the terms equally and equity and equality. Should the focus be on equity instead, and less on equality? Because when I look at the idea of equality, is to give everybody the same thing, right across the board, regardless of who you are, and so on. When I'm thinking of equity, is to give you what you need, and in your situation, What is it that you feel comfortable with and you can do for yourself and for your family as it relates to females? What are we doing wrong, or what could we do better in terms of equity and equality for women? Barker, you want to say?
Yeah, I was gonna throw
Go ahead,
another.
Ray.
Yeah, and then Philip.
I was gonna throw another question towards Philip as well.
Mhm.
Maybe to jump on the point you're making here.
Yeah, do it.
I wanted to understand from, and maybe we could keep it within New York.
Mhm.
The US is funny. The states are almost countries by their own. So I'm gonna keep it within New York. But Philip, feel free to expand it if it helps to elaborate on this point or ventilate the point in a way in which we can understand. What would you say are the key policy changes or legal changes that help to advance women's rights? And from your viewpoint, what impact did that have on society as a whole?
Well, one of the things that sociologists and historians have noticed is that when women have more rights and have more opportunity for education and are able to put more money together and save it, the entire society is benefits from that, and it becomes so we see, for example, with having children and childcare we talked about earlier, in societies where women have more opportunities, they don't start having babies at 16 and 17. Because they know I'm going to college, I'm going to finish high school. And when you do that, it means that you have fewer kids and maybe choose to have not kids at all. But having fewer kids means more resources for the family, usually, because after all, people had so many kids back in the day because they lived in rural areas. They needed every kid you had helped out with farming or with gathering food or herding sheep or whatever it was. But today, where most people in America and in so-called developed countries live in semi-urban or urban situations, so 7 kids is too many to house and feed and all of those things. So equity for women is a every place that it's been done, it's resulted in whatever your parameters are for. It's resulted in more justice, more peace, higher GDP,
Mhm.
all of that. I mean, that's what we see happening when women are treated equally.
Yeah, and I look it too, to add to that, to Philip and Miguel, go back to the home that I grew up in. When you give our mothers money, they can stretch that money. If you give them $100, they can create a lot of food. They can generate food for the whole family for the week. If you give a male that amount of money, he might ended up buying food, buying fast food or buying food, or the amount that he would get is less than the woman. I even look at when we're growing up with my grandparents, poor as we were, she actually stretched the money to buy shoes and a suit of clothes for us individually. And my grandfather used to look at her and say, I don't know how you're going to split this, but this is all I have. So here you go. He wouldn't even attempt to try to provide for us using the same amount of money. But my grandmother was very efficient and very economical when it comes on to money. So to add to your point, giving more access to women, it actually provides for the entire system because they
Yeah.
don't have to spend money,
Mm-hmm.
right, Barker? Yeah.
Yeah.
But what the thing though is, when I look at women's history, I see this hierarchical view that males are constantly struggling to be at the top, whether they are natural leaders or not. They're constantly struggling to be at the top. Whereas a woman can generate ideas, lead a team, they listen to her as a mother, or like Joan of Arc, you know, and lead the team. A man would not let go of that leadership, even if he's failing, and he has a woman there that he could turn over and support. He naturally is not going to do that, you know. So how
You
do we
know,
balance it? Yeah, go on, Philip.
no, I mean, in general, that's right. Most of the world societies are now patriarchal and patrilineal. Um, but it wasn't always that way. And there's still examples of societies where the lineage, the man, marry into the mother's family, patrilineal. That's true in many of the Haudenosaunee, so-called Iroquois, the Six Nations that lived in upstate New York. They were matrilineal, and women decided on who was going to be. They had oftentimes had a chief, a peace chief, and a war chief, and in both cases, a council of older women picked that man. Yes, he was in charge of the tribe, but he got there through the sage advice and support of women. So, in non developed capitalist societies, whether they're Native American or in Africa, you see there are places and times where women have had a bigger role than they do now in politics. Um,
And that's something to acknowledge, is that the phenomena of that we believe to be the norm, there are many societies where women aren't seen in the way that we have been educated to see as a situation that needs to be overcome. There are many societies where women are not seen in that way. What we're speaking about here, and when we're talking about the advancement of women's rights, are about the societies that have decided that this is the order that they want, the culture that they want to pass on, the norms, the customs, all these ideas, the mores that they want to pass on over time. But there are societies, and the more, let's say, use the word privileged, or the more uncivilized a society is, the more likely you'll find women playing a far more powerful role in society. So the question, so in a sense, does that say that the societies that we are now trying to undo were actually the outcome of a society that was designed to be that way, and not through uncivilized behavior or not through inaction, but by direct, deliberate, intentional action, we ended up with what we have.
You know, I think that that words are so important, and you look at the words. That's why I said developed in quotes. When I was studying high school history, and my textbook and my teacher told us about the developed world and the undeveloped world, and when my mother and father studied it, the American textbooks told them about the civilized and the uncivilized. Before that, it was the civilized versus the barbaric. So, and we have to unlearn that language, because no group of way to organize your society has killed more people in more gruesome and awful ways, many times in the name of God or gods, than the so-called developed world in the 20th century wars. So, you know, these are the country that started the war is the country that gave us Beethoven and Goethe and all of these highly civilized, cultural and mathematical. And anyway, so that has to, we have to have a revolution in how we see those kind of things, and teaching kids that it's automatically unsuccessful or bad, not to have drive a car or have a society that paves roads, all of that. It's problematic, and it calls for a reexamination of our terms, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially as we look around in a society that seems either is going to rapidly change, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of evidence that people are going to put aside the money, which is what it's about, in the rich countries, or our society, our civilization, whatever it is, our planet is going to go off a cliff. So as we more desperately search around for other models that aren't as exploitative, that don't have built in, every year we have to have more. GDP has to go up more wealth, and regardless of what happens to the air or the water or our children. Yeah.
And so yeah, so we need change. And but Barker, you brought up a very good point there where it's intentionally done. The societies that we want to create are the societies in which women are not being valued or treated with equity. It's intentionally done. And so we can probably revert to the other side of it intentionally reverse it, intentionally put these people on a pedestal, not saying that we're going to walk around and praise them and worship them as women, but to give them the platform just like any other human being, to lead, to function, and to be, just to be,
And don't forget about popular culture too. In addition to research and scholarship, I just read a great review of a book 2 nights ago about 10 women who led slave revolts.
Yes.
Women, and raised it from Brazil to Africa to North America. But in popular culture, there's it's earning a lot of money. A movie about a queen in Africa with warriors, that's based on an encounter in Portugal, a Portuguese colony. So it was and then the Wakanda series has a whole bunch of strong warrior women. So popular culture is, in some ways, is trying to do a little of what we talked about, which is to imagine other societies that aren't based on what ours is based on, and yet they're successful, and yet people are treated well, and yet there's plenty to eat, and people don't go. So
I'm trying to find
I mean, the
is that Wakanda, the series?
No, the Woman King, I think it's called.
The Warrior Women King, that's right.
Is that what it's called? Yeah, with Viola Davis.
It's got good reviews. I haven't seen it.
She got an award for it too.
Yeah.
Go on, Miguel, what are you saying?
No,
I suppose the issue that it has always been it's just the challenges in society, in the sense of I mean, I'm not a historian, but the way our societies have always been, when you're talking about growing family, different people took on different roles. And there are many families where what is deemed to be subjugation is seen to be the way that it works. And what we normally find in any one of the, what we call it, the agitation for equality, it never emerges from the people that are within the so-called subjugation. It normally is either someone who has, is challenging the status quo and may not have even experienced that status quo. Which is why sometimes when you see changes that come through, it never normally impact the people that the intended change was for. Because in many cases, the changes are not necessarily coming from them. So what we saw, I would say in terms of even the legal effect of some of the, what we call, making society more equal in that sense, is that we saw women going into the workplace now and doing, so the law stopped being, let's say, gender blind, so to speak, and started to ensure that there was a clear space that people are aware of there. That, and I think what happened there was a bigger question now about what was the real goal? Was it to get the equality, or was it to focus on building families as units? I work in an environment now where it's not uncommon to have a husband who plays the role of a woman. Let's say that. I use that very loosely. I'll explain. So the majority of students that come to my school I'm in an American school. And when I say role of, I mean the role I would say a woman traditionally would play in a family. And I'll explain. What I mean is you'd find that the family is here simply because there has been a promotion and they need to be in this side of the world for that promotion to happen. And what you will see quite often, and when I say often, in a way that it is a common thing to know, you might have a husband who is actually the trailing spouse, which is a term that we use, meaning the wife has a high-powered job with Amazon or Google or whatever it is, or Bloomberg or some big company. Husband is here and is doing the pick up, the drop off, all these things, right? That's their job, literally picking up the kids, dropping the kids off, making sure that mom can get on with it. That's something that many people accept as an outcome for the family to work. Yeah. Both of us doing it, none of us is home for the kids, right? Both of us trying to earn more. Our kids are getting influenced by people that we hardly see them. The childminder spends more time with them, or in our case, growing up, the grandparents spend more time with them, right? So the question is, I suppose, not about, it's about, as we calibrate, we also need to keep in mind that there is always another goal that other people had in society at that time, which was pretty much keeping the family together. And as the husband role changed from being the hunter and physically hunting animals, and the wife staying home to just be home, keeping the kids safe, warding off any attacking army that is coming in, and doing maybe even more influential thing. As society evolved, the husband still had to hunt. That was just the way how society assumed it was supposed to be. Now we have two people hunting. My wife and I both work. And so we have to think about, when do we have time for the kids? Because none of us are home. So these are realities. So what I find in these scenarios, that women accepts this new role much harder than men. They have what we call, they have a guilt of leaving their children. That men don't. A woman will turn down a high-profile job that requires travel from city to city and be in and out of cities, coming home, changing, going back out again with a suitcase, simply because she wants to be home with her family. A husband may not. This is what the job is, and take it or leave it. This is how we put food on the table. So these are, in a sense, there's still that, there's a bigger challenge that we have to look at. And it's not let's say, women being blamed or blamed. It's a matter of the society with its capitalists and all that is in many ways, just relationships really work well if one person is keeping watch over the kids. You know what I mean? And whether it's a husband or a man, but what we're seeing more in the capitalist society is both are leaving. The kids are on the internet, they're on YouTube, they're on WhatsApp, they're on TikTok.
So something else is parenting them.
Yeah, and so it's a matter of going back to what the real effect of these things are, because we need to find a solution for that as a society, because we're seeing all of the other things that happen as we shifted from one extreme and moving to another kind of point I don't think we shifted as well into saying, so how do we now, we didn't see shorter working hours, for example, when women entered the workforce equally. So, we didn't see flexi work time where husband would work one day, wife would work another day. We didn't see those things, which would be the natural way of focusing on maintaining family. Yeah. What we saw was just one more person leaving. So now the child has one less. So what we didn't see in the legal framework that said the family unit was an integral part of any society, and everywhere research would say that. We didn't see the legislative framework that acknowledged that this was important and then created this kind of landscape that you would see this kind of flexible arrangement that maintained the family unit. What we saw was just, now that both of us are working, now both of us are out. And so that's just an observation that I'm sharing. I don't know if you're seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Philip, you want to comment on it? We're going to wind down in a few minutes.
Yeah, it would be a shame. We talked about what, as we rebuilt after the pandemic, what we had to learn from those events, and particularly what we had to learn from how women and ancillary things like childcare, all important stuff, were handled. And it would be, if you believe like I do, that there's, aside from our many similarities, there's some fundamental differences between men and women. And women often have a more successful way of organizing groups. They often, and I'm generalizing here, but I feel it to be true. I've seen it to be true. They tend to be a little more cooperative and a little less egotistical.
Yep.
And I know that I don't like to lose an argument, and sometimes I have to check myself. Don't carry a grudge, because my ego and my combativeness has always been a problem. I don't find that, sure it's there, but I don't find it as much with women. So what I'm trying to say is, wouldn't it be nice, as we rebuild schools, as we rebuild our communities and our families and all of these things, that some of the, as Lincoln said, the better angels of their nature, he was talking about people in general, but of women, the gentle side, the side that listens more than daddy often does, the side that is not just the breadwinner or one breadwinner, but attends to every aspect of the children and the home and the food and the spirituality and staying in touch with and helping relatives and neighbors. It would be nice if that took moved in on our insane pursuit of millions, our desire to be millionaires and billionaires, and to what end? And I see our society is tottering on a cliff with the results of bad choices in the environment, bad choices in the economy, and how we've put money in front of people. And yeah, it's not sustainable. Women know about sustainable. I think, again, another generalization, but in my life, women have known more about and could make things be sustainable more than men in general. We need that now. And it would be a shame if we put things back in the same box, in the same model as they were before the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Because those models didn't work.
Mhm.
We had more people die than anywhere.
Yeah.
It was a shame. People come to med school from all over the world to go to the United States, and look how we performed in the.
Yeah, that's true.
And it wasn't all Trump either. They like, Trump didn't help, but there were many things that systems that didn't talk to one another between states that couldn't get going. Yeah, so a lot of things to learn, and I think that, and I'm heartened to see, now the head of the CDC is a woman. You know, God,
We'll see.
I say the way we ran the world or thought we ran the world is running up against some dead ends. Please help us.
It's true. It's true. Very, very true. I think we can close on that note with help us, It's like we're on this castaway island and we write help us women in the sand.
Yeah.
See who will fly by. Thank you very much, Philip, for stopping by again and discussing this women's, it's not even women history, is a societal issue. And Miguel, one love to you and good sharing, very, very good sharing. Everyone, this has been EduTalk, and we will see you next week with another part of the story with Women's History Month. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Miguel.
We'll see you
Thank you, Philip. Good conversation as usual.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.